Hello, and welcome to the October Cereals and Oilseeds update. I'm Vikki Campbell, Market Specialist Manager for the MI Arable team. As we move towards the end of harvest 2020, I wanted to share with you some of the key metrics we've seen this harvest to date. There can be no denying how challenging the 2019-20 growing season has been for the UK, and unsurprisingly, this has played out in the yields achieved in winter crops. Firstly, turning to winter wheat. By the 22nd of September, the winter wheat harvest was all but done, with a small Scottish area left and the occasional fields in northern England, the West Midlands and Wales. The storms at the end of August slowed progress, but the dry weather at the start of September allowed harvest to pick up again in line with recent years. The storms did cause widespread lodging issues, affecting approximately 1% of the national crop. The summer storms affecting harvest of the later sown crop did little to help with yields. The current national yield estimate of 7.1 to 7.3 tonnes per hectare is well behind the 5-year average of 8.4 tonnes per hectare. Yields have been significantly variable this year, with the time of sowing and soil type being key to yield potential. Particularly, those crops drilled at the back end of the winter have been reportedly quite thin, with later drilled second and third wheats performing worse than first wheats. As we move through harvest, quality reduced. With the better crops harvested at the start, this is perhaps unsurprising. Specific weights have held up well for those earlier harvested crops, typically between 77 to 78 kilograms per hectolitre, but later crops were recording averages down to 75 to 76 kg per hectolitre. Earlier crops were posting Hagbergs well over 250 seconds, falling to 120 to 150 seconds for the later crops, although an increasing proportion of feed wheats harvested would have also had an impact on that number. Protein content has typically ranged between 11 to 14% and moisture averaging 15%. Winter barley harvest was completed before the storms hit, which actually allowed progress to be in line with last year's early harvest. Again, the current yield estimate is well below the 5-year average, currently pegged between 6.5 to 6.7 tonnes per hectare. Variability is once more the key here, between regions, on the same farm, even in the same field. Areas where establishment had been poor or suffered moisture deficit in the spring performed particularly badly. Quality is generally held, the exception being grain nitrogen levels for some. Reports of high nitrogen levels, particularly in the east, have been received, and some are having to seek alternative markets for their affected samples. Spring barley is estimated to be yielding slightly higher than the 5-year average of 5.8 tonnes per hectare, currently pegged between 5.8 to 6.1 tonnes per hectare. However, this is some way off the good yields that were recorded last year. By the 22nd of September, 97% of spring barley had been cleared. There's the odd pocket in England, and there was probably about 30,000 hectares remaining of the Scottish crop. Quality generally been good, seeming to avoid any significant impacts from the summer storms. Elevated nitrogen levels have been recorded in some English crops, although Scottish crops are pegging nearer 1.4%. There's been some evidence of increased sprouting in later harvested crops, with these growers often looking to sell their grain now rather than store it. To carry the theme forwards, oat yields are also estimated back, ranging between 5.1 to 5.3 tonne per hectare, with a great degree of variability. The best yields are quoted in the north. Some areas in Scotland have regularly been reporting in excess of 6 tonne a hectare. There's been occasional reports of sprouting where crops stood wet if harvest was delayed, and this has affected quality, although specific weights have generally been acceptable. Finally, oilseed rape. In addition to weather challenges this year, pest damage has plagued the crop for many, playing out into yields. The national average is estimated somewhere between 2.7 to 3 tonne a hectare, and this is well back on the 5-year average of 3.5 tonne a hectare. Yields have been extremely variable, with the worst affected fields reporting as low as 0.5 tonne per hectare. However, those crops that had been planted earlier and that managed to actually establish and get away well have often reported stronger yields. The final harvest report will be published mid-October, and this, coupled with the early balance sheet, is where we'll start to actually be able to have a look at available supply this season. Sign up to our regular updates through Grain Market Daily to keep informed of the latest developments.